Hey guys, I'm here with Random Rab today, and for those of you who may not know who he is, we're just going to go over a little bit of his background to fill you guys in on his musical experience. So just give me a basic where you're from, how long you've been writing tunes for, a little bit of background info.
Yeah, so originally from Indiana, Fort Wayne, and started music really young, you know, like Suzuki violin, which is like this children's music program. My parents were really into that, and did some like church choir and high school band, played trumpet, you know, and then sort of just was really into music as a kid, and then was in a heavy metal band for 5 years in high school. Did that for, you know, into college. And
You have something in common with Skrillex then.
Yeah, right. I was the lead singer of a rock band, just like Skrillex. But yeah, and then did a lot of singer-songwriter stuff, just all over the place. And then what I realized through all that was that when I got my 4-track recorder in high school at the time, that was when I realized that was my favorite instrument of all the instruments that I had been using, and the possibilities of layering sounds. And I'd make little drum loops by cutting the tape, and you know,
Actually physically cutting the tape.
Cutting the tape and doing loops and doing like the bass drum with my throat, and it was just like this whole thing. And I didn't even really understand electronic music at that time. And in fact, I remember the first time I heard drum and bass was with my drummer in the band, and we were like, listen to this drummer, he's so amazing. And I listened to it, and I couldn't figure out what was so, and then I understood that it was electronic music, and it totally.
And it wasn't real drums.
Yeah, it wasn't even real drums.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
It was such an interesting thing. But I didn't really begin to appreciate electronic music until I saw White Zombie live, and the way they brought in the electronic beats with the rock thing bridged the gap for me. And at that point, I just got really interested in it and found other electronic artists like Tangerine Dream and whatnot.
How long have you been writing electronic music for?
I came out to the West Coast and got into like electronic duo with this guy Trippy Nick, and we did an album, and it was kind of like Lean, you know, but with some drum machines and samplers, sequencers, all this kind of stuff. And then when we stopped working together, I had all this gear, and that was around like '99, and I just started writing this my first Random Rab tracks all on live hardware. Didn't even have a computer yet.
Gotcha.
And then when the laptop thing started to, you know, become mature enough to be able to produce electronic music, then I kind of, I still use hardware, but it wasn't my main focus, you know. So
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And where are you based out of right now?
I'm based out of San Francisco.
In the city, or
I live like an hour outside of San Francisco. Yeah, up near, it's an area in the redwoods. So I live on like 50 acres of redwoods right now. I have
Awesome.
a pretty nice studio, just totally isolated, which is cool.
Perfect. Yeah, good for artistic creativity.
Yeah. And I lived in the city for 8 years, and just recently moved up to this area, and it's just been, my life has completely changed. I feel so much more creative and free to be in my art, and so I think I've kind of found the right path for now.
Yeah, feels like you're in the flow there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, awesome. And for those of us who may not have experienced your music before, how would you categorize it loosely?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always been tricky for me in a way, because whenever someone has come to me and told me that I play a specific genre, it freaks me out, and I want to change, because I just don't want to ever get pigeonholed.
I agree.
But,
so maybe let's stay away from genres and talk like things that we can discuss, like tempo ranges, types of instrumentation you use, the sound. So the main
focus that I have, I usually like kind of with Random Rab, my outlet as Random Rab, it's a lot of I really like good like hip hop beats and mid-tempo type stuff with thick bass and, you know, all the satisfying things of all of those elements of bass music. But for me, it's about melody and harmonies. I really like constructing things that have this lush melodic element to them with a lot of instrumentation. So most of my music is based around like music. So
yeah, and a lot of your stuff, from what I've heard, sounds pretty organic, fused with elements of electronic
I would
as well.
definitely like to mix it up. So I have a big collection of some rare instruments. And
do you play these in your tunes?
Yeah. So
awesome, man.
It's
great to
everything from the ground up, you know.
It's great to see a producer who's that hybrid between musician, like acoustic musician,
Yeah.
and technically talented producer. I always love to see that hybrid come together. Personally, that's the style of music that I like.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So
Great.
yeah.
So if you could take us fast forward into your current studio, and walk us through some of the tools that you use, that's, you know, your main software, pieces of hardware, just to get us a sense of kind of your creative space.
Sure. Well, right now my space, as I said, is I like to have a very isolated space from all distraction, where it's complete. I can go in there and have no concerns about any interruption. On a technical level, I like, I like a small room with great, monitoring system, and I use Logic Pro as my main interface, and I have a lot of hardware synths and whatnot, but I've really found that my main tool is my microphone, and so having a good quality microphone, and that is my main interface into what I'm doing. And so I use a lot of plugins and whatnot, but I end up going back to the microphone as my main instrument. So whatever I can sample.
It's the starting point for capturing audio.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have a variety of different mics you'll use for different things, or do you have like a main, like just really nice condenser?
Yeah, I have we have a condenser, and then I also do some I like to experiment with different miking scenarios. I've done a lot of like stereo miking and different environments, and always trying to break free from kind of the traditional, because that's been done and it's cool, but it's like we're in a new era now where it's not always about just the fidelity of getting like a really close miking on like a bongo or something, where it's like just right here, all the levels are right, traditionally stuff. I like to do, put a mic inside of a cardboard tube, or go outside the room and try different angles, and just like use the mic as kind of like this fun tool to kind of, so always looking for different ways and to do it, but also not being, I don't even think like a really good microphone is necessary. It's all about just like being creative with whatever you do have.
Yeah.
So for instance, in my most recent album, Vespers, I went on a trip and didn't have a nice microphone, so I actually ended up doing a lot of the vocals on an SM58.
Oh wow.
With the capabilities of the software, you can really get in there and make it mix well with the music, with the right layering, and you can get away with pretty much anything. So you don't necessarily need all this fancy mic, but don't get me wrong, it helps.
It helps, yeah. But
yeah,
it doesn't account for skill level. I think there's a lot of people who go out there and their first instinct is to buy all the best, fanciest gear they can. But if there's a gap in skill level, somebody with much, much, much lower grade equipment, but is adept with that equipment and knows it inside and out, can produce superior results. It's not all down to the gear.
No, it doesn't. Definitely, especially in this day and age. What these computers are capable of now, I remember 10 years ago, if we would have had, any of us would have had access to this stuff, it would blow our minds. And the fact that we have it now, like you always think, oh, well, what's more expensive than what I own is going to make my music better. And it's just not true. You can just do everything with the simple stuff,
Yeah.
As long as you know that that's what you're working with and work within your means, and don't try and create something that sounds, better than your gear is capable of, and just make it work,
Yeah.
So,
technically speaking, when you're operating in Logic, what sample rates and bit depth are you running your projects at?
I 24-bit and 48,
48K?
Yeah, 48K is generally what I work in.
Are you finding you're recording the majority of your samples, or are you getting some things from sample packs that you find are 24-bit, or?
I record just about everything. I definitely have a few, you'll come across some cool sample instruments, that I've used of different strings or whatnot that I've acquired over time, and I've made my own as well. So I don't always, I don't use loops or anything, but sometimes I'll use like some sample instruments for like, and just tweak things out and just have fun with whatever.
Gotcha. And 48 versus 44.1, just find it slightly higher fidelity, or what's your rationale there?
Well, yeah, I think it might be more of a mental thing in some ways. I'm not really always sure I can tell the difference, but I think it's better, and
Gotcha. And it doesn't push your system as hard as going to something like 96.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is I'm always going to be going down to 44, 16-bit eventually, and so I like to kind of not get too attached to the super ultra high fidelity stuff.
Yeah.
That that I would bake it down anyway. Definitely think it's really important to work in the 24-bit as opposed to 16-bit. I think that's much
Agreed.
more important
Yeah.
than your bit rate, but or sample rate rather. So having that dynamic range is really super important I think that's the key with a good electronic music is to work with dynamics, because often all these synths are super, linear, and everything's so compressed and perfect. The kick and the snare, kick, snare, everything's like really balanced. You look at your waveform and it's just this perfect, waveform. So dynamics is what's, if you can really get in there and work with your dynamics, that's going to give your music this living feeling.
Yeah, more of a breathing aspect.
Yeah. And not to overdo the compression and the limiting and make it this like
tube of toothpaste.
Tube of sound. So
you see SoundCloud, right? You go in there and everything just looks like this blue bar.
You can learn a lot about your music by looking at the waveforms.
Absolutely.
And I think the mastering process is critical to bounce things out and look. And for me, my biggest problem is often snares are too loud. So I'll make this waveform and I'll look and it'll just every snare that hits,
you can see it.
And it doesn't. For some reason, it doesn't sound loud to me in my studio. I'm not sure why. And then I'll go and listen to it in my car. Like, God, crack, 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 and I can always just look at everything and just bring it down. So it's just like the music is really what controls the waveform as opposed to just the percussion and the bass line. So if all your melodies and stuff actually can change the whole shape of your waveform, you're probably going to have more clarity in that range. And that's what's really important, is to have that clarity, especially on big sound systems.
Totally. So your studio that you're operating right now, is it a purpose-built studio, or is it something that you adapted from another space? And
it's actually a studio. It's called the Blue Lotus Studio.
Okay.
A lot of artists have gone through there. It's a cross between a full video editing room with a green screen, blue screen, and the actual studio room was designed as there's no parallel walls.
Good. So the actual room was designed correctly. There's full acoustic treatment in there.
There's packing blankets hanging on the walls. It's my acoustic treatment, but the fact that it has no parallel walls
really
makes
helps.
a huge difference, and it's small.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to have as small as a space is comfortable for you. Really big booming spaces, unless they're fully treated or whatever, aren't going to really
can be a lot more
so
challenging.
The smaller the room, the less you need to treat things. Really, and just find that sweet spot in the middle. But most importantly, it's getting to know the relationship between how your room sounds and how it's going to sound everywhere else.
Getting to know the room.
So I've actually been using the same monitors since 2000, and they're the
Which ones are those?
Event PS6.
Okay.
They're not very good monitors necessarily, but I've used them for so long.
You know them really well.
I know them. Like, I can hear just the subtle changes in how it will affect the big sound system, and once again, it's not really how fancy your stuff is, it's how you know it.
How well you know it.
How well you know it. So,
100%.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've talked about a little bit on the channel is because everybody has access to all these new plugins that are constantly coming out. People are constantly coming out with these beautiful, fancy new graphic interfaces and the newest filter plugin, the newest delay plugin. It's like, it's not necessarily new technology, but everybody wants the latest and the greatest, and learning a new interface takes time. So somebody using the built-in filter in the DAW, oftentimes, but knows it really, really well, can do better with it than somebody who's constantly buying the latest, greatest filter plugin and then figuring out they don't even know what 90% of the buttons do. So there's something to be said for really knowing your gear.
I used to work at a music store, and I learned this lesson was like, I just kept buying gear all the time when I could, and I was accumulating all this stuff, and I would just sit there, and I would all the learning curve, and I eventually learned it's like my rule now is I only purchase things when I absolutely need them. I don't purchase things because it looks cool, or I've heard it's cool or whatever. It's always when I feel like I need something that's going to help me with this aspect of my music, and then I'll look for that product. And then buy that product, as opposed to just reading the magazines and getting all this stuff, because it'll slow you down and bog you down.
Totally.
To get wrapped up in that loop.
Agreed. Nice. Well, I'd love to go into and explore anything you're comfortable sharing with us about your music creation process. And one thing I wanted to say is just thank you so much for taking the time.
Totally.
When I was learning how to write music, I didn't have access to A-circuit producers like you. There wasn't YouTube. I was limited to what I could read in manuals, in Computer Music Magazine and things like that, and people being able to get access to artists was challenging. The other aspect is a lot of producers seem to be, it's becoming less so now, but a lot of producers then seemed quite guarded about sharing their production secrets. I don't know if they were worried about people biting their style or whatever it was, but the cool thing is even if somebody learns about your production techniques, they can only ever use that as inspiration, right? And look at where you've been, not where you're going. And I think one of the things I've noticed from listening to your music over the years is it's constantly evolving, and your sound is constantly changing. So just wanted to acknowledge you for taking the time to support the music community. I think this is so important, and it's amazing that you're able to share some knowledge, because people will benefit from it, really.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'd love to know, like, okay, you're inspired, you're going to write a new track. Kind of walk me through what you do.
Yeah, it's a lot of times it's kind of getting to a place where you have something to work with, and oftentimes that is a beat and a bass line, or just getting a beat going. Something without the beat, it's kind of like, because eventually you want to bring things in and have a little bit of a tempo idea, and that way that helps you kind of lock things in. So I usually start with a rhythm somehow, even if it's the most simple rhythm. So. And deciding what key I'm going to be working in, and then from there it's just an open playground. And I like to just so the thing about electronic music is that you can do crazy complicated stuff. You can make stuff that sounds so all the stuff great. Now make music, So I really think it's important to think simplistically, and really go for what there's only 12 notes. So don't think that you're going to discover this whole thing. Just work with what's beautiful in that, And so I really like to start with the simple things first, and just find what it is. And eventually, I kind of it's like throwing. David Lynch has a good analogy about this. It's like you just got to catch that first small fish, and then you put that fish on a hook. You throw it in, and then you catch another bigger fish, and a bigger fish, and a bigger fish, and a bigger fish. So a lot of times it's not about, I don't think about it like I'm going to make a song that sounds like this. I usually just look for something that grabs me.
You start with one idea, one hook.
And I wait for it to grab me, as opposed for me to control it. So I listen for something that sounds unique and special. And a lot of times it's not about notes, it's about tone, and finding what works in that tone. So what makes that sound special, not just what makes, so I like to think of it too, is that there's songs, and there's tracks.
Yes.
And songs are things that are written like a Bob Dylan song or whatever. It's it passes on, and the song lives without a certain recording. But a track is actually what you're working on. So to really think about the track as its own thing. So it's really important to think about the tones of every little thing, and not just about the melody or what's going to be. So I like to find that little gem and enhance it, and then find another gem that works with it and enhance it, and just listen and listen and listen, and don't try and control anything. And so wherever it leads you at the end, that's where the music, the beauty comes alive. And you never know where that will lead you,
Is being open to the end product, not knowing what that's going to look like before you start working.
Absolutely.
So you get kind of a basic beat down, and then are you jamming on keyboards? Are you doing synthesis, sound design, or how are you kind of coming up with these little jam sounds?
Well, every time it's different, and that's the whole fun of what I do. It's I don't really have any one way of doing it. I definitely do a lot of keys, and finding the bass line is the problem with starting with the bass line first is that you can get stuck in a certain mode, because you want your bass line to be simple, but a bass and a beat together, you just can't hear the complexity of the song. So a lot of times I like to start with the melody first, trying to find a cool melody or something that and I like this feeling of rolling, to where every note leads to the next note, and it gets better and better and better and better and better. So it doesn't have the sense of starting over, with a lot of looping. It's everything wants, so you're on this thing, and every note leads to the next one, and you want more, and so everything just kind of rolls in. And going back to the simplicity thing is, and then when you add your bass at that point, you can really just add these simple bass lines, and it just enhances the whole melody. So I usually like to find that melody, work with it,
and then write the bass underneath it after that. What are you using? Do you find yourself going back to the same synths or tools to write your bass, or what does your process look like?
Yeah, well, the bass is always interesting one. I definitely like to work with like a singular type of layering bass. So I'll have kind of a sub bass tone, then I'll have another tone that kind of represents the character of the bass.
Gotcha.
And I'll EQ them differently, because a lot of times it's hard to get one awesome bass sound out of one instrument.
Gotcha. Are you usually sampling or using synths for your bass?
Usually for synths, I'm generally, for bass I'm using synths generally. Sometimes I'll sample like a bass guitar or whatever, but once again I like to layer things. I also do a lot of stuff with my vocals and throw it in Melodyne.
Melodyne's a fantastic tool.
To me, Melodyne is the most creative piece of musical software that I've ever worked with, and it's not. I think there's a misconception that it's a pitch correction software, when actually it's a creative,
so much deeper
tool.
than that. Yeah, you can create harmonies.
You can do.
Do you have the version that actually can read polyphonic material and extract the chords?
So I just made a song with my friend Cedar Miller where we took a didgeridoo and we threw it into Melodyne and broke it up into all the harmonic frequencies, right? So it's like one note, and then started changing the internal, bass, and made a melody inside and making different chords inside the thing. I also took a sample of my space heater and I turned it on with my field recorder, and it goes meow sound, and I put it in Melodyne and they made a chord out of it, and it sounds like a sitar, and so it just runs through the whole song as a sitar, but it's actually just my space heater. So, and I've done a lot of and I do it, and it's great for vocals, and a lot of times people will hear an instrument in my music and they'll swear it's a flute or something, and it's just singing, it's just me singing, and you just tweak it out, add some reverb, whatever, it's just, Melodyne is amazing.
Yeah, great. Do you use field recordings?
I do.
A big part of your process?
Yeah, I do. I try not to get too lost in my field recordings, because I generally can record for 30 hours of stuff, and you have to sift through it all. So
sifting through and
try to be
slicing
careful.
it up. And everything is.
So I
wish we could just have a room of trained monkeys. Here's the field recorder, and just take this and make samples out of it for us.
But I think field recording adds so much to just even the subtle ambiance of something can add this life to your electronic music. It's kind of like dithering, the concept of dithering, where you want to kind of round out, because a lot of times your music will be so digital, and just putting anything organic, I think, into your music, whether it's a field recording or an instrument or anything, will just make it sound so much better. So I really recommend even the people who are purist electronic music to kind of mix in something real, whatever it is. Noise.
Agreed.
Anything.
Totally.
So
I was just out the other day, and I had my field recorder, and I was just on the SkyTrain, and I just let it record for 5 minutes, and it captured all the next stop is, and people talking and coming in, and doors shoot, shoot, kind of, and you just put that, really, really quietly in the background with some reverb on it, and maybe sidechain it a little bit so it gets out of the way of the beats, and it just creates this texture, this soundscape. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and I also think it's cool to record things that have meaning to you, and have some memory or something about it that's special to you. So when you listen to that recording, it's not just noise of just random stuff, but it has some sort of meaning, and it will enhance your emotional relationship with the song, which I think is important.
Yeah. Now, you collaborate with quite a few other artists, musicians, vocalists, instrumentalists, things like that for your music. When you do that, will you create kind of a backing track, send it to them, have them work on it, send something back? Or do you get them to work on something, they send it to you, and you build the track from the ground up? I'm just curious how that collaboration process works.
Yeah, it really just depends on who I'm working with and how close they live to me, or how willing we are to get together. I've definitely done music with people where I've sent them a backing track, and they record something, they send it back to me. I've also co-created in the studio, just from the ground up, just working, creating songs together. I definitely like to tell my artists that I work with not to get attached to whatever they send back to me, because I'm just gonna rip it up, always. And I like to be completely free.
Rip it up as far as slice it and
just
rearrange.
Change and rearrange, and I don't say, okay, here's a song, now I want you to sing the words just like this and this exact point, and then mix it in and just make it sound right. I usually like to get their vocals back, and maybe I'll even put it in a whole different song or whatever. I just like to have that palette, and it kind of goes once again to what you hear as opposed to what you want. You know, if you want it to fit, you may force it to fit when it doesn't really fit. But if you just go with what your ears hear and what sounds good, then you're liberated to do anything, and you can kind of change things around and don't get stuck in any rut, you know, ever, you know.
Cool, cool. Speaking of getting stuck in ruts, does that ever happen to you? Like, and
absolutely.
At what points of your production process do you find that happens to you? And I'm curious what you do about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get stuck in ruts all the time.
As do we all.
Yeah, and I think music is an amazing art because it is so absolutely humbling. Because you'll walk into your studio one day and go, I'm gonna write a fucking hit. I got it. I got this shit figured out. I'm the man. I can write this hit. You go in there, you work for 3 days, and then I wake up and realize that I've been working on the biggest piece of shit ever made. And it's not only a really big piece of shit, but it's a well-produced piece of shit, which is the worst kind of music. So I think
it's a nicely polished turd.
Yes. So the better you get at producing, the worse song you're capable of making. You know, because you get all the skills down, so it's a well-produced turd.
Yeah, it sounds polished.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. So, and I'll wake up and be like, oh my god, I can't believe I thought that was good. And what was I thinking? And a lot of times that'll hit me. It's just like, what am I doing? How am I? And I get lost. Kind of like, and it happens sometimes where for days I'll just be like, what am I? You know, I can't even make one note that sounds good. And that often is when I break through. You know, so I think the key for me is just to keep moving forward, keep making more stuff, and you'll make shit. You'll make shit, but let it go, let it go. And
now, when you have a project, you wake up and you're like, "Wow, that sucks." Do you take that project and scrap it and then start fresh?
Yeah. Once I realize for the most part, I may save certain elements, you know, but I think it's really important to not get attached to the point where like you'll spend days working on something, you're like, and I'll just delete it. I won't think twice about it. If I just know that it sounds like crap, I'll just delete it. And I think it's really important.
Done with it, clear that mental headspace.
Yeah, because
make room for something else.
Keep churning and churning and churning, and it's like there's, you know, and because a lot of times for me, my best songs are the best part is written that first night. You know, that's like 80% of the song. So really, it's about hitting your stride right from the get. And when it's like I feel like sometimes I'm knocking on, trying to open all these doors and nothing's happening, and I'm just like constant. And then all of a sudden, a door opens, and I'll hear that I'm like, I'm onto something now. And then I get really excited, and I just know right from the get-go that is going to be amazing. And then for those next couple days, it's just like fully engaged in that piece until it's complete. You know.
How long does it usually take you to write a piece of music?
It doesn't. There's no. Yeah. It doesn't. I don't know.
No fixed length.
Sometimes like one night. Sometimes you know, months and months. It just depends on what the track is and how complex it is. And
so you have some things that you kind of get to a certain stage on and just let it kind of marinate for a bit. And you come back to it. And things like that.
Like I said, I usually like if I can get like 80% of the song done in the first night, I'm in pretty good shape at that point, because like that, capturing the energy of that moment. If you wait too long and come back to a song that I've been, you know, worked on like 2 months ago, it's just like I'm just messing around at that point. You know, can't really like get it, so I kind of like refresh it somehow by adding something totally new or taking away something that I was attached to, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you find with tunes there are certain things that you try not to suck up too much time on and keep your momentum going, such
Absolutely.
as, for example, you know, I have some students that will get really stuck on trying to really polish a sound, and it's almost like they get stuck ahead of the game in this mix-down phase, but they haven't really created the foundation of the tune yet. Are there certain things that you're like, I'm not going to do that now, I'm going to save that for later and focus on the basics? Then just curious what your philosophy around that.
I do a lot of cutting, chopping, and kind of integrating things, and a lot of times it's kind of sometimes it's a pain, but I'll have a lot of clips and weird sounds that I just know that are more, you know, time-consuming activities that I'll save for when I'm done with my creative process. So I usually will kind of just like start like just trying different things and try and create this song. Like the sooner I can get making the song, the better off I am, instead of like trying to make loops and you know, like, because a lot of times I'll start with a beat and a bass line and I'll end up working on like a loop for like days and days. I'm like, oh, so I start making the song, you know, like make an intro, even if it's like not such a great intro. Just make that intro, and then think about how the beat's going to come in. Think about how the bass is going to come in. Think about how the melodies are kind of coming in, and just like start to make the song.
Yeah.
And,
so build things out linearly.
Yeah.
So you actually have your song structure.
Yeah, like start from the beginning, you know, and have it. I like to have it so when I press stop and start from the beginning, there's kind of a sense of like refreshing my ears a little bit. So like having a sound in the beginning that kind of like, you know, so it's not just this constant repetition, you know, because if you're listening to the same thing over and over again, you can just kind of get lost in that. So like, you know, have something, just anything, you know, whatever it is in the beginning, to kind of intro it in, and I'll like feel that mood, because the song wants to like go through time, you know, wants to journey through this time. And so it's not all about like sections and stuff. It's like, because you can have this thing that won't make any sense, but if you introduce it properly, it'll make perfect sense.
Yeah.
And so what is it about that about time that, you know, makes music work like that? And so there's tricks you can do. One thing is, like, for instance, if you're listening to like a really loud air conditioner, right? You don't even hear it, and then someone turns it off, and then all of a sudden the sound of it is so loud because it's gone, right? Yeah. The same thing can happen with music, where you can create these kind of like imaginary tones, where you have like this kind of thing that's like writing, it kind of builds, you don't even hear it in the music, and then it goes away, and the echo of it in your mind, that silence, that the absence of that becomes like a note within itself. Mm-hmm. So working with negative space, and that's only possible through listening through time. So if you're stuck in a loop, you're never going to be able to understand what that means to have that negative space. So if you build things into it and then create this time, and it plays with your mind. So really think about, in between every note on your keyboard is silence, you know, is a break, you know, and that's your most used note, you know. So really work with silence and the absence of sound just as much as you work with the sound itself.
I forget where this quote came from, but it's music is the space between the notes. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I always remind myself of when I'm writing. Mm-hmm. It's because one of the things I struggled with when I was first getting started was I would just jam every little bit of space with stuff, and I was very uncomfortable with space. Whereas some of the best music that I like and appreciate now has, like, a lot of the sound of like funk comes from these very intentional little stops, very short stops and gaps, and like that's where the groove comes from, you know? Yeah.
Silence is critical. Yeah, use it.
Cool. Speaking of grooves there for a sec, I wanted to ask you, when you're writing your beats and things like that, are you writing with MIDI, or are you doing your percussion in audio typically?
I do both.
Yeah,
I do a lot of MIDI stuff. I do like use battery often as an interface, and a lot of times too, I'll just play a rhythm on something and then chop it up, and just and what's nice about, and use it kind of as a MIDI, like, but having the kind of the different nuances of all the different hits of things and then sequencing together. But so it's like, it's still like MIDI, you know, it's like I'm still dropping it with MIDI notes, but it's actually recording some things I've done. And so, you know, a lot of quantizing. And the quantize engine in Logic is actually really good. It's kind of like similar to warping in Ableton.
Yeah.
You can actually get away with a lot of really cool things, you know, fix up things.
Move it around.
Yeah.
Now, when you're, one of the challenges that we run into sometimes with quantizing and programming percussion with MIDI is the snap to grid. You know, everything sounds like I am a computer.
Yep.
How do you get around that? Do you use, I know Logic has like swing and grooves and things like that, or do you just like disable snap to grid and move things around manually? And how do you find that organic groove
it's a tricky little thing, and you know, a lot of times it's hard to really know what's gonna make it sound alive. But yeah, so if I get stuck too much in the quantize thing, I like to use different quantize settings for different percussive elements, and then a lot of times I'll actually go back and humanize things by changing the velocity or slightly alter, like, you know,
the timing,
the position, and have, you know, certain, generally have the kick drum hit where the kick drum is on the grid, like always, like, and then everything else is a little bit more flexibility. I also like to layer, you know, I have like 2 different snare sounds. I do this a lot, and then I'll kind of vary the timing of each single snare sound by, you know, there's a humanize function in battery that works great, but you have a layer, so the average of, so if one snare is a little late and one snare is a little early, your average is going to still be centered somewhat. So kind of having that variation of layering really helps, and panning like your hi-hats, so have the same hi-hat sounds happening on the left channel and the right channel, but then the timing is slightly different. So it's the same exact sound. So you hear it's kind of just a little slight flux and movement, just kind of the natural sound. Yeah. So.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing some of the studio tricks and tips with us. It's always enlightening to see and hear how somebody else watches, creates their music and things like that. So I know you have to head off pretty soon, so I'd love to touch just a little bit on the music business side of things. And I know you've risen up on the West Coast and built a really great name for yourself, and you're playing all up and down. You're about to head off to Costa Rica and play the Envision Festival, which very jealous. I wish I could be going to. Sounds like an amazing event. You're gonna have a blast. But yeah, how did you go about building up your fan base and getting your name out there?
I think initially the most important step I took was doing this bi-monthly gig in Ashland, Oregon, where I lived, where I played every other Friday for the same hometown crowd, a really small town. And that gave me the training that I needed to, because having to entertain, playing for your friends every other week, or just a lot, nothing is more challenging than that.
So you built up your skill as a live performer by repetition.
And just constantly playing, and because they keep you on your toes, because they've heard you, they know it, and so making music that your friends will want to hear will also give you a sense of like what kind of scene you want to. Because when you're making music, you're creating the vibe of the party, So what kind of party do you want to go to? Do you want to go to like a sexy party? Do you want to go to like a goth party? Like what kind of party you want to go to? So make the music if you want to be, because you're going to be at the party. So make the party what you want. So anyway, I think that was really good, and it took me a long time for my down-tempo music to be accepted in the main stage time slot. And for years and years, I felt like I was up against this kind of like, I couldn't quite break through. And a lot of people were like, oh, it's too slow, or it's not this, it's not that, whatever. And I just knew that I knew then, and it's still true now, is just play what you love and keep doing it. Never stop. Always play what you love. Don't give in to the pressure of what other people want you to play. I mean, it's okay to take inspiration from everyone, but play what you love. And eventually, if you just make beautiful music, you will rise to whatever level you want to.
Yes.
I can't say that with, there's nothing about the music industry that is going to stop beautiful music from rising to the top. People love beautiful music. They love it. And that's what they want. So if you make beautiful music, you're going to be just fine. So never lose sight of that.
Yeah. Now, given that, there could be 10 people out there that are producing beautiful music. Some of those will rise faster than others because they're doing a few certain things. We have the ability to self-market ourselves. There's YouTube, there's SoundCloud, there's some people are releasing on record labels, some people are self-releasing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what your strategy has been. Not everybody has a strategy, but like, how have you been getting your music out there and making it available for people?
Just that, making it available for people, whatever it takes, and
through labels, self-releasing,
through. I think it's your personal contacts are absolutely critical. The friends you make in the industry. Yep. You never know who you're going to meet, and you never know who they are when you meet them. Yeah. And you have to be fucking cool to everybody you meet and respect everyone that comes up to you. Yeah. I've definitely made the mistake of younger days of like kind of like, I don't know, blowing somebody off, and then I realized who they were, and then I'm like, oh, but wait, I now that I know who they are, I wish I would have acted differently. And then I was like, that's when I feel like I've matured to a level now where I treat everyone with respect, and the people that I've seen this all over the industry, the people who are cool and love the people, because it's not just you, there's sound guys, there's lighting guys, all these guys, and if you piss somebody off, they're gonna not give you what you need you need everyone to work together. Yes. So whether it's the security guy or whatever, be cool with everybody. Yeah. And when you walk out of that club, and if you're friends with everybody in the club, they'll remember that, and those relationships and that trust builds. So when it comes to time, like when you're looking for like music management or a label deal or whatever, those people aren't just like listening to your music and say, okay, I want to sign them. they're talking to people. They're asking around, like, what's this guy like? Can I trust him? Is he reliable? Whatever. You know, what's the feeling around
what
this?
vibe did I get from him, and do I want to work with him again?
And if you're cool, they want people because people want to work with people they like, you know, and that's what it is. So these managers have tons of options, and these label guys have tons of options. So being cool is like, you know, on top of making good music, just be cool.
make beautiful music, you know, be likable,
you
know, treat everybody equally. They seem like these, you know, it's nothing too complex or overly philosophical. They're just basic good principles, but a lot of people, like you've said, seem to lose touch with them. So it's great to be, thank you, because it's great to be reminded.
And I think it's also really important to understand what it is that you're seeking and define your success. So, you know, being a rock star is probably not realistic for a lot of people. So if you can say, I am successful now because I'm making music that people love and that I love to make, then you're already successful. And that sense of success will be reflected in what you do, and people will want to work with that sense of success.
Because it produces confidence for you, right?
So, so I think that being said, it's really important to just build your fan base, not be attached to what's going to happen. You know, not to see it as like, I want a label deal, I want this, I want to just build your fan base, just keep working, trust, and when you're ready and when your fans are ready, everyone will come to you and ask you what you want. You know, it's you know, knocking on the door of all these management things isn't really going to work for you. You know.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, one of the things that's been happening in the music industry is it's become more challenging to sell music. What do you think about the free philosophy and free versus charging for music? And
they're both amazing. I think that I chose to sell this latest album on iTunes mostly due to the fact that I wanted to chart, to see what would happen. I got into the iTunes top 10.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So that wouldn't have been possible without giving it away. So that there's kind of a little bit of a game there. Other than that, I'm really open. I think just getting your music out there is really important. For most of artists I know, it's like it's like 20% of your income is going to come from music sales, merch, all that kind of stuff. 80% of your income is probably going to come from gigs.
Yeah.
So, and if you can do some commission work or licensing to, some people can change that percentage a little bit more. So that's kind of my philosophy. Is really the selling the music thing is a bonus and it's nice, but the real money comes from the gigs,
from performing.
Yeah,
because that's something that can't be pirated.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I know I have to run, so I'll just leave it with two quick questions, and then we'll wrap. But in your course of getting, from 10, 15 years ago until now, is there one point that stands out that was like a big break for you? It was like, hey, boom, I got to this next level of exposure or getting booked for this crazy gig, or any particular moment that stands out to you?
Yeah, I wish I could really define the moment. I think the moment came probably from accepting, like I said, accepting that I was where I was at now was exactly where I needed to be, and when I realized that I loved what I was doing now, and then I made it. I won the game at that point once I realized that I loved what I was doing, and it didn't matter what happened. It just didn't matter. I'm gonna keep making music because I love making music, and that's all there is to it. And if other people like it, great. If they don't, it doesn't matter. I'm not gonna stop. So I think that was really, for me, the point where I broke through. And once I realized that, it was just, it doesn't matter now. So one bad gig here, one whatever here, it doesn't matter anymore. I've succeeded.
Yes, based on your own personal definition.
Yeah,
that's such an important message, because what I hear in that is acceptance versus putting pressure on ourselves from saying, I need to get here, being destination focused, and also enjoying the journey. If you love where you're at any point in time, you're going to be more creative. You're going to have more self-worth, self-love. You enjoy what you're doing, and it's not about, well, if I get booked for this gig, or if I release this album and it sells this many units, then I'll be successful and then I'll be happy. Yeah.
You're going to die.
Yeah.
Make the music you love now. That's all there is to it.
Awesome.
It's just like
awesome.
It's just all a journey. Don't. It's just, if you love your music, then that's the reward that will get back to you. I think there is some sort of cyclical thing. The more love you put into your music, the more love comes back to you. I don't know how that works, but there's this thing. Which is
Karmic law.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, last question. I'd just love to give you an opportunity to let us know what some upcoming gigs or upcoming releases or anything pertinent and special for you coming up in the next couple of months that you'd like us to know about.
Yeah, so mostly just the festivals this summer are going to be Symbiosis, doing a sunrise set at Symbiosis. I'm really excited about that. Also
Excellent.
playing Lightning in a Bottle.
Yes, I will be there.
Yeah, cool. Lucidity Festival, and I think we're doing Sonic Bloom. But yeah, I just got really excited about the festival circuit this year.
Excellent.
And Boom Festival in Portugal, and so that's really what it's all about. Is just getting to these festivals, and I'm really promoting my latest album, Surreal, and
okay.
Yeah.
And
so
that's available on iTunes?
It's available on iTunes or on my website, randomrab.com. You can get CDs or high quality downloads there, or you can go to iTunes, whatever you want.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man, I'd just really love to acknowledge you for taking the time
Thank
to do
you
this.
so much.
And again, like when I came up to you and met you last night, you were exactly like you said. You were open, you were receptive, you didn't know who I was, and offered your time. And
cool. Thank you so much.
I've learned a lot just by getting access to your mentality and
Cool.
and things. But there's thousands and thousands of other people that this is going to impact. So
Great.
on behalf of them, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Monetizing.